As most of us are already familiar with, strength training is synonymous with low reps and long rest times, whereas endurance training is synonymous with high reps and short rest times. Therefore, training for both at the same time is usually seen as quite the challenge.
Quit, don't quit. Noodles.
But in pursuit of the ability to rep our pull-ups with ease, whilst also being able to pull multiple plates off the ground at the same time, I had no choice but to find a way. And so in this video, I'll go over how we can use some effective programming to maximize the return on investment for both our strength and endurance gains without crashing and burning in the process. Let's begin. If you truly want to skyrocket your progress, click the top link in the description down below and join our brotherhood of passionate athletes that all want to take their strength to new levels and unlock awesome skills as well. In the community, we have live calls, courses, monthly challenges and more, so join now whilst you still have the chance. Click the top link in the description down below and I'll see you inside. Cheers. Also, if you want the chance to get coached by me one-on-one for free, click the second link in the description down below where there's a Google Forms link, fill that out, and if we're a good fit for each other, send you an email and we'll get started working together. What that means is that we'll create a workout program tailored to your specific goals, and we'll have weekly check-ins to make sure you stay on track. If that sounds good, check out the link and I'll see you there. Cheers. Alright folks, let's dive into the full strength and endurance training program, starting off with the problem. Because as I introduced earlier on in the video, the problem we're sort of running into is that if you want to train for strength, ideally you should be using lower rep ranges, and if you want to train for muscular endurance, right, for endurance, you want to be using higher reps. And in addition to this, you want to be using shorter rest times, generally speaking, with endurance training, right? You want to teach your body to recuperate quickly. And with strength training, you can use longer rest times because you want to allow your body to have these high quality, intense sets. The question quickly becomes, is there any overlap? Because looking at this continuum, we quickly see that muscular endurance is best stimulated when we use high rep ranges, and strength gains are best stimulated when we have shorter rep ranges, right? Smaller rep ranges. But what we actually see is that if you have greater strength, you will get endurance gains from this. So if your weighted pull up and your weighted dip increases, each body weight rep will be easier, relatively speaking, right? Based on how strong you are, each bodyweight rep will be, relatively speaking, easier, so you can perform more reps. Also, in opposite fashion to this, the more endurance you've got, right, the better your endurance training, the better your baseline for strength. So if you can do more bodyweight reps, you've got a better foundation for weighted reps, right? Because you've got more solid technique, at least if you're doing it with good technique, you've got good body awareness, and you've got mind-muscle connection, to name a few things, right? But note that this has the greatest ROI early on in your training journey. The stronger you get and the more endurance you gain, the more difficult it's going to be to realize endurance gains from strength training and vice versa. So to give you guys an example, if you can do a 40 kilo weighted pull-up and you can do 25 pull-ups, 25 bodyweight pull-ups in a set, if you take your max weighted pull-up from 40 to 50 kilos, so you have a 25% increase there, you're not going to see a 25 increase in reps. You might not even see a 10% or even 5% increase in reps, because at that point, you have such high specificity for both your endurance and your strength that training one won't automatically give you a lot of gains in the other, right? The earlier on in your training that you get greater strength or greater endurance, the larger the impact will be, positively speaking, on the other attributes, but not so much later on, right? Basically, the further you go in your strength and endurance journey, the less you'll observe that strength gains lead to significant endurance gains and vice versa. So you need to train for both attributes individually to improve both attributes, right? And this, especially applies in the long run, and this is all about that specificity, right? So let's go over some rapid fire programming that you guys could have in the back of your minds as we go over this program now. First and foremost, the order of our workouts, right? Our individual sessions, we want to start off with a warm-up, generally speaking, then we want to go into our strength training, then our endurance training, and then a cool down. As for the warm-up, you just want to elevate your heart rate and increase your blood flow to the relevant joint. Then you'll have your strength, endurance work, and then a cool down at the end. Kind of optional, but it's nice to sometimes just stretch out the muscles and make sure you don't lose range of motion. Now, on the weekly, you want to do your push before you do your pulling, at least in the ideal scenario. And this is just because when you are pushing, you're using in a lot of exercises, whether it's the overhead press or whether it's the weighted dip, you're using your lats as sort of a base of support. So if you start off with a pulling session on Monday and you tire out your lats, when you come to Tuesday and you're supposed to have a push session, your lats will be tired and you'll sort of work less effectively. So push before pull, generally speaking. Then You want to be employing around 4 to 6 days per week in terms of training days. I like to have at least 1 day per week that is an active rest day, but you can have more if you so desire. So for the general program, I'd recommend doing one of the following programs. The first sort of format you could go for would be having 2 push sessions, having 2 pull sessions, and then having room for possibly 1 to 2 leg sessions or just active recovery. Then alternatively to this, you could stick with 2 push and 2 pull sessions and add in possibly a leg session and add in a hybrid session. So whether that's a full body session or an upper body session, so a hybrid push and pull session in one, that's sort of up to you. And third example is that if you really want to go all in on just push and pull, you might even want to opt for something like a push and pull 3 times per week for both of them type of split. But this is probably a bit more taxing if you want to go purely strength, so this probably lends itself more to those of you that want to do endurance to the max. So something to keep in mind. Then further on for the programming, when it comes to strength work, we want to be using sort of incremental loading or a sort of step loading system. I'll go into this a bit more shortly. Then endurance training, there are lots of different strategies we can use for getting in many reps and lots of time under tension, but that is sort of the name of the game. With endurance work, you want to have lots of reps or a lot of time under tension. Then when it comes to accessories, this is a thing people tend to discuss quite a bit. I would say that if you're training for both strength and endurance, I wouldn't do a lot of accessories at all. I keep them as bare bones, as minimal as I could. So when it comes to rest times, this is also something that people tend to discuss quite a bit. I'd say that for strength, I'd recommend going for minimum 3 minutes. But if you want to learn more about how to rest and how long you should rest in order to maximize strength gains, check out this video somewhere on screen right now for how to do so. And when it comes to endurance, this depends on the training approach, right? But I'll cover this shortly. And also, something that people tend to overlook quite a bit is this of a deload week. And that's basically that in order to perform at a high level during your training blocks, you should be doing a deload week. So a week where you either do no training or very little training, just generally speaking, every 4 to 8 weeks. And this depends on your sleep, your nutrition, your energy levels, your training intensity. All of these things are sort of factors that go into deciding how often you should deload. But the big thing here is just that from time to time, if you want to translate it into just common language, from time to time you should take time off to either do no training or to do very, very light training to give your body some time to catch up. Also, caution, as I've sort of said earlier on, right? Like, you want to be careful with overdoing it with supplementary movements, because it comes down to this, that if you want to focus on strength and endurance, you can't also be optimizing for hypertrophy or skills training, etc. and etc. Well, you can, but you can't do it without making your strength and endurance training less effective, right? There are always trade-offs, and that's just something you'll have to keep in mind for your training. Now, let's look at the strength training then and get into this, eh? First and foremost, what you actually want to do is you want to do one primary exercise per movement category, right? This comes down to less is more, being more selective and being more deliberate with our training. For the supplementary movement, you can employ 1 to 2 accessories if they serve a specific and important function. If not, don't include them. So yeah, it will not be a focus in this program though, and if you want to look at more accessories, you can check out a program like this one in the corner above right now. And yeah, for strength training, our priority will be to do few but intense and high quality sets. And next up, when you want to do your strength training, this is usually before your endurance training. And you might be asking why, because it's not necessarily obvious, but strength is all about those high quality intense sets, right? That's our focus when we're doing strength training. So if we do strength training after we do our endurance training, we'll be too fatigued to perform well. And you might ask yourself, why does that really matter though? If I'm tired, but I still do some good strength work, does it have any significance? And this is actually really interesting because the effectiveness of strength training is not based on how heavy it feels, but how heavy it actually is. I'll give you guys an example. Let's say you can normally do dips with 30 kilos for 5 sets of 5 reps. If you first start off with endurance for a particular training session, so you can only do 20 kilos for those 5 sets of 5 reps, you won't get the same strength gains from those 5x5 at 20 kilos, even if it feels just as heavy or even heavier than your normal 5x5 at 30 kilos when you started your session off with strength. So that means as long as it feels heavier, that doesn't really matter. But if it is heavier, that's what matters. So if you've tired yourself out to the point that 20 kilos feels as heavy or even heavier than 30 kilos, that doesn't mean you'll actually get a lot of strength gains out of it. So the bottom line right here is that to ensure adequate quality, you want to perform strength work before endurance. Simple. Now, when it comes to push specifically, the main movement we'll choose here is sort of dependent on your long-term goals. I'd recommend the weighted dip or the overhead press. Dips are sort of good to go for in the direction of, if you want to go for the direction of planche, and overhead press is phenomenal for handstand push-up. But regardless of what you choose, like I'd have one as my main movement. When it comes to supplementary exercises, right, with these auxiliaries, you could look into some pronated push-ups. You could look into like some overhead press in the case if you're doing weighted dips, or some weighted dips if you're doing overhead press. But as I've said earlier on, like I would keep auxiliary exercises to an absolute minimum. And I won't really discuss them in this video, so yeah, feel free to experiment at your own risk, so to speak. Now, when it comes to pulling, our main movement will be the weighted pull-up or the weighted chin-up, again, relating to your long-term goals. So the weighted chin-up is usually a better approach for the one-arm pull-up, and the weighted pull-up usually has greater transfer to other pulling skills. So whether you want to go for a conventional muscle-up, front lever, right, or climbing when you're in that pronated position on the wall, etc. As for the supplementary movements on the pulling front, lots of options here where you can have different types of retraction work, so whether that's a perfect pull-up, inverted rows, etc., etc., or you want to do weighted hangs, but again, here I would keep it to an absolute minimum with the auxiliaries, because if you want to train for strength and endurance, you're already splitting the attributes you're focused on. But if you're really interested in this with accessories, the different sort of additional exercises you can include in your pulling program, I have a tier list video on that somewhere on screen right now, so feel free to check that out. Now, when we look into programming, there are a bazillion different approaches you can take to this. But something I think could work really, really well in tandem with our endurance training later on is what I call like an incremental inspired system. And this is based on Matthews Lattes' approach. Because Matthews Lattes' approach is that you have 3 sessions per week, where each of those sessions is both push and pull. So you do 3 to 4 sets of pull and 3 to 4 sets of dips, right? And then the thing that makes the program go around, the progressions, is that based on how many reps you can do in your final set, you want to increase the load on your pull-ups, on your dips for the next session. So if you could do 8 reps in your final set, you'll add on 5 kilos, right? If you could do 7 reps for your final set, you'll add on 2.5, etc., as you guys see in this table. And in order to sort of stabilize and find a weight you can work with, you want to start with a weight you can do for around 10 to 12 reps, and then you'll have a few days, a few weeks to stabilize. That's sort of a good way to kick things off. But it doesn't really suit our particular training program in this case, in case you're doing 2 separate sessions or if you're doing some other type of system. And also, like, since we're splitting up push and pull, it will be quite a bit different regardless. So these are the sort of options that I've devised out right here. You can either do 2 separate sessions per week, either 4 or 5 sets per session, or you could do 3 separate sessions, right? So like 3 separate sessions of push, 3 separate sessions of pull, so 6 sessions in total, where each session you do 3 strength sets, right? Also, the progression system here would be based on the minimum number of reps you can do for all of your sets, the last 2 workouts, as opposed to the last single workout. So what this means is that if you on Monday last week had a push session where you did 20 kilo dips for 4 sets, that being 7 reps, 7 reps, 6 reps, and 7 reps, then you keep the same weight because you've only had 1 session. You don't have 2 sessions to sort of upgrade your weight with, right? Then on Thursday, you do the same weight, and you do your 20 kilos, and you might hit it for 7 reps, 7 reps, 7 reps, and 7 reps, because you were sticking with the 4 sets per session type of scheme. Then based on these numbers, you'd see that the minimum number of reps you could do in any of the sets these last 2 sessions was 6. And based on 6, we follow the same sort of progression, well, 6 reps to 1.25 kilos, where we follow the same sort of gain from the rep numbers we have in Matthews Lattes' program. And that means the next Monday for your next push session, you add on 1.25 kilos and then you hit 4 sets, try to get as many reps as possible, and you keep on going. You might be asking why we want to be basing this program on the last 2 workouts, and well, it guarantees that you have 2 workouts at each weight before you increase. And this is beneficial because it makes the system more resistant against natural strength and weight fluctuations, right? Because if you have a really strong session where you just feel really strong and perhaps your weight is a bit lower than it usually is, that's advantageous for pull-ups, but perhaps not as advantageous on the dips, right? But based on the natural strength and weight fluctuations you might have, having one great session won't throw you off in the sense that now 2 sessions after, if you're feeling a bit weaker, you'll just be completely unable to do your sets. But this way, you'll sort of have like 2 sessions at each weight, and I feel like it's a bit more conservative in the sense that it gives you time to adapt. Also, when it comes to rest times on this program, 3 minutes minimum, but most important thing is that you're just mentally and physically recovered and ready for your next set. Then a bit of an Easter egg as for the strength training, right? You can use a step loading progression system as an alternative to what I just outlined. And this is if you're starting to plateau with the incremental inspired system, or if you simply want a program that's more resilient and works really well despite strength and weight fluctuations. So if you decide to use this program, that being the step loading program, just copy paste the program into the strength part of your workout and keep the endurance part the same. I'll get to the endurance part. And for those of you that are interested in the step loading system, check out this video on screen right now. So let's look at endurance training. Now, first and foremost, endurance training quickly becomes quite repetitive. So I like to spice it up if I'm going to do this properly at all, right? So what does that mean? You could either be doing EMOMs, so a particular number of pull-ups or push-ups, or certain rep target every minute for a set longer time duration, or you could be doing AMRAPs, so as many reps as possible, so you're just basically doing max sets, or you could be working on your weaknesses or just changing up the variation from what's like conventional, right? So when you're doing push, you could be doing like static holds for max time, whether that's on parallel bars or rings, right? Whether that's for the dips or for the push-ups. You could be doing those static holds in top position, like locked out, or in the bottom position of particular movements. And you could be doing slow perfect reps, right? Speed reps for max counts. All of these things, you can mix them sort of with AMRAPs and EMOMs, etc. On the pulling side of things, you could be doing bilateral and unilateral hangs. You could be doing slow perfect reps. You could be doing speed reps, etc. And here the priority when it comes to endurance training is that you do a lot of repetitions and you get a lot of time under tension. So when do we want to do our endurance training? After our strength training. And it's not too important when you do your endurance training, when you think about endurance training isolated from everything else. But when we factor in the strength training and that we want to be as fresh as possible for our strength sets, it makes time that endurance comes after strength. So, and also it's interesting to consider that like whether you're pre-fatigued or not isn't too important. Like if anything, it could be better for endurance gains in a shorter amount of time when you're pre-fatigued, because you're already a bit fatigued and then you have to like push beyond, and like your body has to learn to recuperate in a short amount of time, that type of thing. So for our endurance training, what's our main movement? On the pushing side of things, I'd recommend either doing bodyweight dips or bodyweight push-ups. This is sort of the most common thing. And on the pulling side, bodyweight pull-ups or bodyweight chin-ups. Then, when we look at programming, lots of things you can do, but for this video and for this program, I'd recommend EMOMs. Sort of nice to get around, you know how long they'll last, right? Sort of predefined, and you sort of know what you get, right? So a good starting point, for example, if we do a basic pull session, could be that you start off with 5 pull-ups every minute on the minute for, let's say, 30 minutes, but I'll get into some more spicy examples, more specific examples later on. If you're curious about where to start off, how many reps, I'd say 25% of your max rep count can be a good place to start. So if you can do 25, or 25 reps doesn't really give a good number, does it? But if you can do 20 reps, then you would do 5 reps every minute on the minute. If you can do 10 reps, you do 2 or 3 reps every minute on the minute. And it might not be the perfect number for you, it might be way too low or way too high, but point is that you have at least some starting point. So based on that, you can see if you were supposed to do 5 reps every minute on the minute for 20 minutes, let's say for a session, and you couldn't get to further than 10 or 15 or whatever it is, then you know that, okay, this was too many reps per minute. Simple. So then you tweak it up, you lower it a bit down, or opposite, right? Like if it was too easy, you increase the number a little bit. And yeah, if you're less advanced, you might, for example, want to start off with 1 pull-up every minute on the minute for a set time duration. Or even less advanced than that is that you do 1 pull-up every other minute on the minute, right? That's also a possibility. Conversely, if it's too easy, you might want to do something like 10 or even more than 10 reps every minute on the minute for a set time duration. And when it comes to progressions right here, I would recommend like first step would be that if you cannot do a movement for a single rep every minute on the minute, you want to move from every other minute or every third minute or whatever you have to, every minute on the minute. So if you're used to like doing, let's say you want to do muscle ups and like they're quite new to you, so you do 1 muscle up, then you rest the remainder of 2 minutes, right? So you have like 1 muscle up every 2 minutes on the minute. Then you want to be moving into slowly one muscle up every 90 seconds, on every 90 seconds, 1.5 minutes, for example, right? Using some intermediate increments till you eventually get to lowering that time so you can do one muscle up every minute on the minute. Then, once you're sort of in that every minute on the minute bracket, the standard sort of bracket, you want to improve the total EMOM duration. After that, you improve the number of reps you do per EMOM. So a quick example of that would be that if you're doing a 20 to 30 minute EMOM session, you start off, for example, doing 5 pull-ups every minute on the minute for 20 minutes. Next session, you increase the total EMOM duration with 2 minutes. So you do 5 pull-ups every minute on the minute for 22 minutes. Then next session, you do 24 minutes of the same format, and so on until you get to 30 minutes of 5 pull-ups every minute on the minute. Once you've gotten to 30 minutes, the top of this 20 to 30 minute bracket, you go back down to 20 minutes total EMOM duration with 6 pull-ups every minute on the minute instead of 5. So, and then you just keep on going. You take those 20 minutes of 6 pull-ups every minute on the minute to 30-minute total EMOM duration. Then you go back down to 20 with 7 pull-ups EMOM. And that's how you can do it. Now, as for balance, I love this quote that says balance is not something you find, it's something you create, because this leads really nicely into my next point about personalization. And when it comes to personalization here, I want to discuss like what's the right balance for you specifically, right? Because you can go to two aspects of this sort of slide, right? You can go for strength fully or endurance fully, right? First and foremost, if you want to discuss this more specifically, more thoroughly for your situation, join the free community, link in the description down below. But let's say your focus is to go for strength, purely strength. Well, not purely strength, because it's strength and endurance, right? If you want to go for purely strength, there's a video in the description about that. But if you want to prioritize strength over endurance, that could look like something as follows. You do 2 workouts per week for push and pull, right? So you've got 3 days off or 3 days for something else during the week. And here you want to focus on having less junk volume in your program, right? You want to have those high quality intense sets. So during a week and during a session, during each pull and push session, you want to focus on having really good strength sets. So you do your 5x5, and those are really good. You're really focused on dialing them in to the max. And then you might just want to do some 10 minutes, for example, 10 to 20 minutes, if you want to scale it, right, with 2 minutes every session, adding on 2 minutes every minute, adding on 2 minutes every session till you get from 10 to 20, then go back down to 10 with added reps every minute, right? So just having a short EMOM sort of session, right? Just doing 10 minutes, for example. Alternatively, if you want to prioritize endurance training over your strength training, right, what you could do is that you do more than 2 workouts per week. So either 3 push and 3 pull sessions, or you do 2 of each with a hybrid one in there, right? That's an alternative. And here you want to focus on higher volume. So you want to do strength sets, maybe like, do them well, but they're not like your bread and butter of the session. You sort of want to do, whether it's 4x4 or you want to do 3x3 even for even lower volume, that can be done. And then you want to add on top of this, you want to have a large endurance volume. So around 40 to 50 minutes for an EMOM could be a good example. And then if you want to have something in the middle, something that's sort of 50-50, you might want to go for your 5x5 sets. 5 sets of 5 reps for strength, right? Which might take you 20 to 30 minutes more or less if you use good rest times. And then you might want to have a 20 to 30 minute EMOM. You can tweak these up as you want to, but those are some pretty good numbers right there. And then you pair this with a sort of 2 push sessions and 2 individual pull sessions per week. Then looking further into personalization, like it's important to think about what you want to achieve, right? Like goal specificity. First and foremost, again, join the community if you want to discuss these things more thoroughly. So for our strength goals, right, you might want to be able to do strict reps and high load, and then it makes sense to train with strict reps where I have strict form and do high load. Conversely though, you might want to do higher reps but weighted, and then it makes sense to do higher reps and weighted in your training, right? So specificity is important. Similarly, for endurance, right? Like if you want to maximize the competition approved reps or deep range of motion reps, as opposed to just chin over bar reps or chest to bar, right? If you're thinking about pull-ups, for example, if you want to have like really deep or really high range of motion and you want to have some type of competition standard that you meet, then training as similarly as possible to those competition approved sort of standards, to those ranges of motion you want to hit, whether it's for a competition or for yourself for a PR, is very beneficial, right? So just do something that is as specific to that as possible. Similarly, right, if you want to maximize the number of reps you can do with or without utilizing active rest, whether that's hanging rest or one-arm push-up hold type of rest for the pushing side of things for push-ups, or the hanging rest for your pull-ups, right, then train like that, right? Train with hanging rest. And similarly, right, if you want to maximize how many slow reps you can do or how many speed reps you can do, then train with doing max speed and max slow reps. So, also, final thought I wanted to include here is that if you're getting stuck, it's quite easy to get stuck when you're sort of tweaking around a bunch of variables at the same time, you likely have some misplaced volume in your program. Remember that to progress with strength, you want to do fewer high quality, intense sets, and overall not too much junk volume. And also, in order to progress with endurance, you want to do higher volume and perform more total reps or get more time under tension. Alternatively, if you feel like you've got your strength and endurance training separately speaking dialed in, you might be resting too much, whether you're not making endurance gains, for example, you're not teaching your body to recuperate quickly enough, so to speak, between efforts, and you might be recuperating too little between strength sets, for example, if you feel like you're making too little advances in your strength training. And yeah, well, it also depends what type of balance you have, right? And you might have two sparse deload weeks, so that's also something to consider, right? Like if you're not deloading more often than every 8 to 12, 16 weeks, and you're training really hard and you're eating quite shit and you're sleeping quite unwell, then these things are definitely going to take a toll on your training. All right, the last point I wanted to include here is about patience and consistency. You want to be in it for the long game. You don't want to be running that far ahead and be putting in so much work into the gym, spending so many hours and so little on recovery, comparatively speaking, right, that you rush into an injury. And on the other side, conversely speaking, you don't want to be doing so little and dropping consistency to the point where you fall off the bandwagon and don't see any progress, right? So you keep consistency high, but be patient and pace yourself so you don't run into an injury. And if you can manage to do that for a long time, you'll be able to see great results, right? Consistency, put in the work, and pacing yourself to avoid that junk volume and to avoid doing so much that you get injured. So even if your goal is almost purely endurance, you can absolutely overdo or misplace volume. That's actually quite important to keep in mind. So with that, don't forget to join the free community, top link in the description down below. Goodbye, guys.